Good evening. We're going to give people a couple minutes to get in from the inside. If y'all could go ahead and get at a table. We have a couple tables up here in the front and the back. If you're on that back row, if you're looking to participate, please get into a table. Should be about 8 or 9 people at each table. We'll get started hopefully in about the next 3 to 5 minutes. See a couple people still outside trickling in. All right, if we can go ahead and find some seats, we're going to get started here in about the next 60 seconds or so. Got a couple seats up here in the front. All right, if I get everybody's attention, we're going to go ahead and get started. So to kick us off, my name is Anthony Armstrong. I'm the Director of Planning Development Services here for the City College Station. With me, we've got a number of other city staff here through our department, several members of our department here to help facilitate at your tables. I'm sure you've met some of them or will meet some of them here in a little bit. We've also got some members of the city management team here as well, members of council, members of P&Z, a lot of community members from the city side. Also want to thank everybody for coming out today. This is a very big investment of your time, so we very much appreciate you guys being part of this process. Looking forward to getting some input, some feedback, and then those of you who are interested in being a part of the full process, which we'll go over, being part of the committee. So I'm going to kind of walk us through the agenda for this evening. Couple of quick housekeeping items. There's some refreshments, snacks, etc. on the table over here, as well as some comment cards, I believe. Also, if you need to use the restroom, if you're unfamiliar with City Hall, out that hallway right behind Molly Hitchcock, raise your hand, please. Right behind Molly is a door. It'll take you, if you take out that door to the right, is the restroom. So if you need to, again, we'll be here for about the next hour and a half, 2 hours. If you need to use the restroom during that time, by all means. I'm going to start and kind of go through, some of you might be familiar with this presentation here in a second, some may not, but I'm going to kind of go through the overview of the planning process, the area we're talking about for the small area plan, and then after that we're going to have a short section if there's any high-level questions, open the floor for a second for that, and then go into kind of these breakout groups. So basically for each of your tables, we're going to sit through and have some conversations on 3 different major activities for the group, or the groups. We'll go over kind of a vision statement for each table, kind of talk about what is it that you want to see in the Northgate area. Again, Northgate has this larger planning effort area. We'll do a stakeholder analysis exercise. So what are your likes in the area, your dislikes, opportunities, challenges? And then we'll end with a mapping exercise where you can kind of use the map at each of your tables, put some comments down, talk about something very specific or broad that you'd like to see in the area. A couple things I want to kind of set the stage on is, we'll talk more about the breakouts later on. But this item is going to be over this entirety of the Northgate planning area at large. So this is not going to be about individual property. As we go through the timeline, we'll kind of focus in on different areas within this boundary. This is not about the surface lot. This is about Northgate as a whole. So everything from Welborn Road to Texas Avenue, University Drive, up to city limits, even including the city of Bryan. In that conversation, as we get deep in, we'll talk about kind of key areas or sub-areas, as we call in the planning process. One of those will include kind of the entertainment district, and we'll go over a schedule here in a second to kind of point that out. To kind of walk through the engagement opportunities for this planning effort. So we are at the beginning. This is the kickoff meeting. This is a large public meeting. After this, starting next week on Tuesday, and then bi-weekly after that, we're planning to have a meeting where we'll go over each of these subjects, and I'll pull this up so everyone knows where this is located in a second. And again, kind of the purpose of the agenda here is that as we go through the process, we will kind of narrow in on different areas of Northgate and the sub-areas. And then if you're unfamiliar, if you go to cstx.gov/Northgate, you can see everything that we've put up on the website for anybody's input. So those of you online, those of you in the room, or to tell your friends about. It'll kind of talk about each individual meeting at the top of the page. And so I'll go through this very quickly. We've got little push buttons to get you to certain areas. One highlight would be the survey map. So this is a very great tool if you're uncomfortable giving feedback in public or want an opportunity to provide some feedback. You can go to this document. It'll give you a little bit of verbiage on the area, kind of what we'll talk about tonight in shorter words than I can say. And then we'll get into, you can go to provide input. And so here it will take you to a map. And on this map, you can essentially click around in the area and you can add different features. So you can see a couple of them already located there. You can put a note, you can put a comment, something that you like, dislike, whatever it is. You can mark up this map. It is a live map, so whatever gets put on there, everyone can see. So keep it appropriate. But at the same time, we're open to all your unfiltered feedback. So anything that you have to say in the area, again, at large, feel free to put it in there. Another couple things on the website are, if you click this map, it'll take you to the same link that we just looked at. This is the timeline, again, blown up, so this will be updated. Really, this schedule is pretty much going to be stuck to until April 15th. After that, as needed, we might have additional meetings if there's additional context needed to wrap up. But looking, again, this is kind of our timeline that you can click on. If you click on each of these emblems, it'll take you to a link to the city's website that has the actual meeting itself. So if you need to make a calendar appointment, et cetera, you can download that there. A couple of key pieces for the website, and we'll talk about them a little bit more in a second, are if you're interested in being on the stakeholder committee. So this meeting right here is a large kind of kickoff public meeting, get some input, get some thoughts. If you want to be part of this whole process, so as we talked about the process with all the different meetings coming up in the future, that'll be primarily sessions like this for the stakeholder committee. If you are interested in being on the stakeholder committee, right now there are only 10 of you, so hopefully we get more than that. You can fill out this form here on the left with your name, email, phone number. It'll send it to us. We've got a contact, and so we will keep you up to date on that. We'll walk through, there's a couple of key people that we've reached out to specifically to be on this committee, different key stakeholders in the area, and I'll kind of walk through that in a second. They'll be on that committee as well. Additionally, there's a comment form, and so if you want to provide a written comment in any way, shape, or form, please use this form on the right. Nobody has done that yet, which is, we were making sure that it worked until this morning. So it's definitely working. So if you have any thoughts and feedback, please go fill that out. Additionally, if you want to send a file or something, you can email that email address here at the top, northgateplan@csdx.gov. That'll go to an inbox. It goes to me and several other of our members of the team working on this process, and we can kind of look at that and get your feedback in that regard. Additionally, if you're interested, there's a lot of, if you're a history buff or you want to kind of know what's happened in Northgate in the past, this is a collection of all the different documents the city has done in the Northgate area, different Northgate plans, et cetera, dating quite 30 years plus back. So if you want to go look through those as well. Again, so kind of what we're here today is what is a small area plan? So right now we're in phase 2 of this planning process. We've gone through phase 1. We went to council the last couple of meetings, at the workshops with them where we talked about the boundaries. We've sat down as staff and as additional stakeholders and what's needed, what do we need to go and research, and then how are we going to do the outreach, how are we going to have meetings like this, who are we going to have at the table, et cetera. So we've gone through that process. We're starting really phase 2 this evening. This is the kickoff of that. So we started pulling a lot of information and existing condition data on the staff side, so we're pulling a lot of information together to bring that forward to this future stakeholder meeting discussions. And really we're starting the stakeholder community feedback now to kind of determine what are the goals, what are the visions that the community wants for this area, again, as a whole, and we'll talk about the area here in a second. Once we wrap all that up, so again, towards the end of April, we'll go into phase 3. So phase 3 is going to be where we actually develop the plan. We'll bring that back to the stakeholder committee for a draft, and then eventually get that off to city council for their consideration. That'll also be a public meeting. All the meetings that we have earlier are also public meetings, so anyone is welcome to attend those. To adoption and implementation as we go forward. So again, this is the boundary that we've talked about and settled on for the Northgate planning area. It's a lot bigger than what we've historically called Northgate, and I think we'll talk a little bit more on what some people envision as what Northgate means to them. That's one thing that we do want to hear from you tonight is when you hear Northgate, what does that mean? What is that boundary? What is important to you about that? So we'll walk through kind of briefly each of these areas. The first one is North Point Crossing. So this is actually part of another small area plan by the city. It's called the Northeast Gateway Plan, basically looking at that hard intersection of University Drive and Texas Avenue. It's primarily covered by one development. There's a couple of things that could be redeveloped in that area. A big piece of why it's in this area, or why it's in this planning effort, is looking for connectivity. A big piece for this area of the city is trying to get some connectivity to it with Century Square, with Hensel Park, and ultimately this whole area overall. And so a lot of what you'll hear about, a big topic of discussion will be what are your thoughts on connectivity, pedestrian, vehicle, et cetera. The next area is Century Square. I think most people are probably familiar with Century Square. Right now it is a ground lease, I believe, by A&M, and so it is property owned by A&M, developed by a different developer. And so there's office space, multifamily space, hotels, retail, all on the ground today. And then if you've been driven by there, I'm sure you have, there's also a lot of the phase 2 commercial development is going in currently. And then of course they're actively looking to fill out the rest of that space on the property. The next one we have for an area to talk about is Hensel Park. So back in 22, there was some stuff brought to the regents about Hensel Park and kind of how do they want to go about redeveloping it to make it more of this destination park, more of this destination area, kind of reduce some of the crime issues they had going on out there. From that, a couple months ago, the regents heard an update, and this is a plan from that update, or a snippet of that plan on some different things they plan to do out there as they go through the rest of that process. And so again, a big key piece for the city, as well as even the city of Bryan, is how do we incorporate connectivity to Hensel Park in this overall area and make it a very meaningful place to work, live, and play. Next, we've got the city of Bryan, if you're unaware, has recently looked at buying up a large portion of property kind of north of Northgate. And in the top left is an image of kind of what they plan to do. So that's a lot of residential multifamily. They've got some mixed use in there and some hotels currently planned. Probably still a long ways off. We will have City of Bryan at the table as part of the stakeholder committee for some conversations on it, but they're roughly about a third of the way through acquisition of the properties through there from what we can see. And lastly, we have Northgate proper, and we'll kind of dive into that in a second. First, I want to talk about the university corridor. So obviously a big component of Northgate in this area in general is the pedestrians and the students, right? And so what is that connectivity to A&M? We've obviously done a lot of work as both the city, as TxDOT, as A&M, trying to make this corridor a lot better from a pedestrian safety standpoint for bicyclists, the car movements, accidents, et cetera. And so back in 2018, there was a study done by TxDOT that was a little exploratory or had some good intents, but maybe the price tag was a little bit too much for all of us to stomach. And so they've gone back and looked at some different options that we could look at pursuing for different crossings through this corridor. And so to kind of walk through those, a couple ideas that have been presented as part of the study are some different pedestrian crossings that would help eliminate conflicts with pedestrians and vehicles in the Northgate area and the Century Square and on. And so this first crossing is right over here at College, Main, where the current Promenade is now, and the Ballard area. This would kind of continue that on as a pedestrian and bicyclist connection over the street. Two different concepts, one where it goes all the way down to Boyette as an entirely enclosed kind of underground space for vehicles, or just one where there's simply two bridge crossings at those locations. Additionally, they've looked at, this is the intersection near where the McDonald's is currently. So this would be Spence Street, taking that as kind of like the underground tunnel in between the rec center and the Kyle Field, if you're familiar with that. This would be identical to that, essentially, or very similar kind of concept going in for University Drive to go over, pedestrians, et cetera, could go underneath and help with those movements there. Additionally, we've got some overland crossings at the Century Square. So this would be where the current driveway is into Century Square. If you were going into the main area past where the new development is going on, you'd have this overland crossing for pedestrians, have some play area spaces, et cetera, to kind of activate these different corridors. And then finally, for Polo Road, another crossing kind of closer to the other side of Century Square on some different grade separations there. And so these are all different ideas that have been proposed as part of a study by TxDOT, and the city has actually gone out and applied for a grant from the federal government on potentially getting some funding to help look at these projects and make them come to fruition. So just a little bit of information again for your conversations here that we'll have in a little bit. And a quick history on Northgate proper. What we have is we kind of consider Northgate today. Back in 1990, it was actually designated as a slum and blight area within the city of College Station. When you look at the area today, it has about $804 million in property value. So it has come a very long way from being slum and blight a little bit over 30 years ago to what it is today. So back in 1994, if you were here at the council meeting the other night, there was a video played about the kind of the area of Northgate in this original plan. That was kind of the first starts of an effort of planning or kind of making a small area plan for Northgate. And so from that became several different activities to follow to help kind of revitalize this area. And so in 1995, all the way through 2002, there was a Northgate facade improvement program. So that was a partnership with the city where the city would give funding to a private developer, private company, and help them redo the facades of their different buildings throughout Northgate to help kind of revitalize those buildings and bring them up to out of that slum and blight designation. In 1996, kind of what was known as the Northgate Small Area Plan that we talked about recently was first envisioned, and then in 2003, there was an implementation plan based off of that plan that was added. We'll talk a lot more about that, but this is essentially this was the planning effort that recently was sunsetted in 23 or 24. And that's a lot of what has generated all the success and stuff that we see out in Northgate today. In 2020, Community Services did a Northgate operations plan. That's a very specific plan about city operations in the area. Out of that plan came about $4.5 million of SLAs that the city has to look at and consider as far as additional assets to put into the area to help with different operational needs. So this image is actually from the agenda when we sunsetted the Northgate small area plan. Generally speaking, a plan lasts about 20 years is kind of the planning horizon, 20, maybe 30 years. This has obviously been well past that 20-year mark. So this is a snapshot of kind of all the projects specific to the small area plan that was originally done. These are all the projects the city did. And so there are others outside of this map because they weren't in this boundary. But the city has spent well over $26 million in capital projects just in the last about 15 to 20 years, helping revitalize Northgate and get some infrastructure in there to support redevelopment of the area. In addition to that, currently the city has about $8.5 million in assets just in things like vehicles, stuff for the garage, et cetera, out there to help run some operations. So we talk about Northgate proper. Right now, the Northgate is divided into 3 zoning districts. So one of the things that we'll want to talk about through this process is, is there a need for those zoning districts to stay as is? Are there things you want to see changed to those areas? Are there things you like or don't like about them? And so right now, there's 3 different designations for Northgate, Northgate 1, 2, and 3. Essentially, one of them is heavy commercial, one of them is a mix of both worlds, and the other is heavy residential, is their intention. And so the Northgate 1 is in the purple. It does encompass the entertainment district, and we'll talk about that here in a second. The areas that I want to point out directly that will be some discussion for Northgate and more discussions with the council as well are the entertainment district. So this is kind of the bar district, et cetera. The surface lot obviously in the middle of the city's parking garage. Right now there are 33 bars in this image in that area in red alone. So again, when we talk about Northgate, I think a lot of times we kind of zoom in to maybe the area in red. In reality, we're actually talking about this holistic 150 acres. This other area is a little bit smaller. I think it's about 15, 20 acres. Another key piece for the city, as far as city-owned property, is the park. So Northgate Park was recently redeveloped by the city about 4 or 5 years ago. There was some additional improvements done to Northgate Park. It was granted as parkland, and for a long time didn't have too many improvements out there. Now there's a nice pavilion, a little bit of walking paths for people in the area, et cetera, and just some nice green space. Another big talking point during all of this area is the one section of Northgate that isn't platted. So platted is when property has come to the city and said, hey, we're ready to develop. We want to make this a legal lot of record and basically start subdividing our property out through the regulations. The property in blue is the last one within Northgate. It's the last property that hasn't gone through that process. They just started that process, and so there was a preliminary plan, a final plat. I'm sure some of you have heard about the Hurricane Harry's closure. There is a that's part of this development, so that developer came in. They're looking to redevelop the property and put a mid-rise, I would say it's 7, 8 stories up through there. And so that property started coming through with this development. And then again, when we talk about Northgate and its growth, a big thing that always comes up, of course, is the high-rises. And so kind of want to show an image just for context. Everything with the yellow star is a permitted high-rise that has been done. So either it's under construction right now, there's a couple of them, 3 under construction right now, or they are actually built. And so high-rises can mean a number of different things, but in general, these are all structures that are over 5 stories tall. The tallest being 23 stories for a high-rise out in Northgate. And so with that, we've got several more beds and student facilities in the works. The 4 orange dots represent projects that are in the works. So those are projects that have been submitted to the city for development, but they don't have permits. They haven't started construction. They could still die on the vine, so to say, but probably pretty unlikely because people have invested a lot of money to get them to this point. So we've got 4 more additional that are probably coming down the pipeline, and again, 3 under construction right now. So you're looking at a good probably 5,000 to 6,000 beds coming online in the next couple of years in Northgate. So a lot of density, a lot of very geared towards student housing, and so kind of what does that mean for the city and what does that mean for this area holistically on what do we try to do? One thing I did want to point out, and it'll be on that same website, if you're interested in learning more about kind of the growth that's gone on in Northgate, we did generate this, it's kind of a tracker for us, but it's become a very helpful tool and also something we can share because we do get this question a lot from different people in the media or different members of the community. But this is a map that you can get to on the city's website. It'll kind of go through all the different, again, what I just pointed out is different high rises. It'll go through all of them, those that have gone through permitting, and it kind of gives a good amount of detail on them. So it talks about when they opened, how many units, how many stories, et cetera. So if you're interested in that information, if you want to be part of the committee or you're just interested in general, this information is out there for you to go and take advantage of. So again, I talked about the stakeholder committee. That's kind of the next step from this evening after we kind of wrap up the exercises we'll go through here in a second. Right now, these are kind of the representatives we have. So we're looking for one from each of the areas. We've got someone from Hensel Park represented, kind of who's on part of their planning system. Texas A&M, we've got numerous members of Texas A&M, Transportation Services, the President's Office, and Student Life, all represented on the committee, being part of the process and the conversation. We've got representatives from Midway with Century Square, the developers of that, TxDOT, City of Bryan, obviously the Northgate District Association as well. And then, again, if you're interested in being part of this committee, we would encourage you, if you want to be on the committee, I think there was a sign-up sheet where you could say yes or no, so we can reach out to you that way out in the lobby. But if you're interested, please go to the website. There's a very obvious link to go and submit your or not an application, but go submit your interest for being on the stakeholder committee, but it is open to citizens. We do want to see input at large, not just from these particular targeted representatives of the area, but the community as a whole. Again, this is just that image of that form. You can go through, fill it out. On the left-hand side is the one if you want to be in the committee. If you don't want to be in the committee, but you want to give us comments, we do check those pretty much daily, but certainly once a week. So if you want to submit these in, we can get your comments. And if you're on the committee, you'll be getting an email from probably me specifically once we start setting up those meetings. So with that, that's a very fire hose style, quick introduction of Northgate, planning efforts, et cetera, in 30 minutes or less, hopefully. Almost. So are there any high-level questions about process things related to this process before we talk about the breakout groups? Yeah. That's the pavilions and the promenade. So it's the structures on top of it, as far as that was what was generated out of that. Correct, the different shade structures throughout there. Yeah. Ooh. Veronica. Yeah, I mean, so great. Even the 150 acres of Northgate isn't planned by the city, right? It's private property owners who come and do their development. There are zoning regulations that go on top of that. But ultimately, the idea is how do we bring together all these key pieces of this section of the city and provide connectivity and integration with each of them. So in conversations with the council as we went through this process, it was envisioned that we wanted to see how do we connect with Century Square, how does it play into what we do and allow in the Northgate area as shown on the screen. How do we look at Hensel Park when as that revitalizes into a large community park for the area, how does that integrate with what we want to see? Do we want to see additional structures in the northeast section of Northgate proper, or do we want that to be residential, commercial? How do you want that to interplay with what we're looking here? But around it. So in the things that, I mean, right now what we'll talk about in breakout discussions will be what is it in these areas that you want to see? And some of it, again, to your question, is the city doesn't control what happens on private properties. There are regulations that can control some uses, but when you look at the uses allowed in Northgate, it's a large variety of uses that are allowed in Northgate. It's kind of a sky's the limit, literally, in the Northgate area. And so when we look at Hensel Park or Century Square, it's kind of the same thing. We don't control what they want to bring into that area, but we can certainly talk about how do we have connection to that? How do we, knowing what some of their plans are for that area, what do we then want to utilize and what we do have control over, as far as planning for master plans, pedestrian plans, et cetera. Correct. Sure. I mean, ultimately, there's different discussions, and I think as you guys have ideas, that's what we're looking to hear. What is it the community wants to see? And if there are things that are not feasible for different reasons, as we go through the process with the stakeholder committee, we'll help provide that information, and then ultimately they will kind of parse this down. As you know, we could start out, it's just like, you know, your kid has a Christmas list, right? And you probably has 100 items on it, but you get down to where there's only 10 of them under the tree, maybe, right? And so you've got to start somewhere. I think that's kind of what we're doing. That's today. That's the kickoff, and then as we go through there, we'll see what's feasible for that information, what's a reach, what is out there but might take a little bit, take a lot of effort, and what is low-hanging fruit, and all in between. Not to derail, but any other, these are great conversations, by the way, for your table, so keep those going, or at your other tables. But are there any other questions, again, high level, before we talk about the breakout groups? But no, if Eleanor, you still had one. Got it covered. All right, so we're going to start and go through, you've got a facilitator, so a member of the city should be at each of your tables. Hopefully you've been introduced to them. So we're going to walk through now some different breakout groups and discussions. So the first one, they'll kick that off now, but again, this is kind of a high-level visioning activity. There's some kind of quick bullets here on the screen. But with that, if you have any questions for me, feel free to come and find me. I'll be up here kind of walking around. Otherwise, please, the facilitators are going to start now with this process, and then I'll kind of walk us through as we go, and move into each activity. I'll kind of direct that. So have at it. Yeah, and if you're in the back row, there's a couple of seats up here in the front.